Hi again, everybody. I'm 1010 Wins Sports Director Marc Ernay. This is On the Mark, and we are joined by a special guest this morning. He is a tennis writer and Sports Illustrated staffer, Jon Wertheim, talking strokes of genius. Aptly named. You wrote this book back in 2009 about the 2008 Wimbledon men's final between Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal, one of the epic tennis matches of our time. It's being turned into a documentary, which will premiere on Sunday, July 1st on Tennis Channel. It'll actually be on broadcast television on Tuesday night on the CW network. John's with us. Thanks for being here. It's been a while.
It has. Pleasure to be here.
You and I actually worked together on a James Blake charity event years ago. I think that was '09 with Melanie Oudin right after she had become big. And what happened to her?
That. Boy, what happened to James Blake, too?
Well, he's working. No, you're going to see him when you get to London.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Gosh.
So you wrote this book in '09, and I want to go back first to the match, Federer-Nadal, 2008. An epic final, obviously. People talk about it as being perhaps the best tennis match, the greatest tennis match ever played. 5.5 hours, rain delays, darkness setting in. At what point did you get the impression, get the feeling that this was going to be a match for the ages?
That's a great question, because the first two sets, Nadal wins, and everyone thinks we've got a new grass court champion.
Right.
And we have a new, not just that, we have a new champion in tennis. Nadal had beaten Federer 4 Sundays earlier at the French Open, just crushed him.
Right.
And this was going to consolidate the Nadal era. He was going to dethrone Federer. Mm-hmm. Boy, great champion, Roger Federer. Too bad you've now been toppled by this kid. And Federer storms back, and he wins the third set. And then he staves off match point. There's a forehand. Nadal lines it up. It's going to be the Wimbledon championship. And Federer zings it back, saves the match point. We go to a fifth set. Mm-hmm. And I think by the start of the fifth set, this had been a very high-level match statistically. Yeah. I mean, the statistics weren't particularly relevant, but statistically it was a high-level match. And I think by the fifth set, everybody sort of said, no matter which way this goes, either Federer makes this tremendous stand and this title defense, or else Nadal wins the first 2 sets and somehow manages to come back and win the fifth. No matter what happens, we've got a classic here.
When did you start to think about writing this book? Was it during the match, or was it sometime after?
No, the story was I was approached about doing a book on Roger Federer months and months in advance.
Okay.
I think even before the season. And Federer was terrific and sort of said, listen, it wasn't going to be an as told to, it wasn't going to be sort of authorized, but he and his people said, we're not going to stand in your way, and let's just stay in touch. They were very cool about that. He loses the Australian Open. That's disappointing. Then he loses the French Open, and you're sort of saying, I don't know about this. This isn't the book they signed up for. They thought they were going to get the great champion story and maybe a guy that wins 4 majors in a year. And then he loses those first 2 sets of the Wimbledon final to Nadal, and I'm thinking, boy, this book project may be toast. And by the end of that match, I said, you know what? I have a way to tell this story, and it's not going to be the Roger Federer biography that maybe the publisher had anticipated. But I think there's a clever way to do this. So, it was a weird day for me as well.
Getting chills thinking about it. How concerned were you that you'd be able to get 200-plus pages out of this match? When you sat down there?
It's funny because John McPhee, terrific, longtime New Yorker writer, great essayist, he had done a book that looked at an Arthur Ashe match, levels of the game, decades earlier. I should know this offhand, and I don't, but in the late 60s, early 70s, and had used a tennis match to tell a biography and to tell a story, and that was really the model. So in a sense, this was a derivative book. But I said, Federer is a fascinating story, but so is this Spanish kid, and he got to the top of the mountain completely different from Federer. Yeah. I mean, talk about contrast. I mean, this guy was raised on an island, and his uncle converted him from righty to lefty. Right. Yeah. Federer comes from this quaint European city, and it's just 2 ways to mold a champion that are totally different. It's lefty, and it's righty, and it's clay, and it's grass. And so I had this John McPhee predecessor in my head, so I said, you know what, I think there's a way to use this tennis match as a prism to sort of tell a story about rivalry.
Now, we're coming up on 10 years. In a couple of weeks, it'll be it's hard to believe, 10 years already. I remember, it's one of those days, I remember exactly what happened. In fact, I had a softball doubleheader that morning. So I DVR'd the match. I come home, I stayed away from all kinds of news reports. Sorry, 1010 Wins, I didn't listen that morning. I get home, I start watching it from the beginning. I eventually caught up thanks to the rain delay, and now I'm watching it live. And I don't know about you, but I can't help but think of the McEnroe-Becker Davis Cup match from '87 up in Hartford. 6.5 hours. I was thinking about that. I was thinking about Borg-McEnroe.
I was going to say, most people say Borg-McEnroe.
Wimbledon in 1980 with that epic tiebreak that John won, I think was 1816 or something like that. 1816,
very good.
And I know a lot of people started thinking about, too, Ali Frazier. Again, while you're sitting there watching this match, what's going through your mind?
Back then.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's funny. I'll tell you a few things. Yeah, you think this is the essence of rivalry right here. And these guys have been at each other. And until then, Nadal had won on clay. And remember, this was the third straight final where Federer and Nadal had met at Wimbledon. And Federer had won the last year. It seemed to be sort of this nice détente of, Rafa wins clay, I'll win grass, we'll fight it out on hard courts. But it's funny you mentioned those other rivalries because Ali Frazier, third time they fight, and then sort of their careers go downhill as you'd expect in boxing. Even Borg-McEnroe was a terrific rivalry, but in a very compressed amount of time. Neither of them won a major after 25 years old. The fact that 10 years after this match, so we have this tremendous sort of pinnacle rivalry match. You remember it 10 years later. I think so many casual sports fans who, I think tennis could benefit from a lot more of these moments. But I have a lot of people saying, boy, I haven't seen a whole lot of tennis since, but I remember that 4th of July weekend, that incredible match and the rain. And the fact that 10 years later, though, we're going to start Wimbledon Monday. Yeah. And Federer's going to be on the top line of the draw, and Nadal's going to be on the bottom, and they've won the last 6 majors, alternating. These are the top two players in the sport. 10 years later is really remarkable. So you have this great match. Crushing defeat for Federer, this great, emboldening, exalting win for Nadal, but it didn't really kill the rivalry. If anything, it kind of jet-fueled it.
Yeah. We're on the mark with Jon Wertheim from Sports Illustrated and Tennis Channel. He's jetting off to London any second now. I want to talk about the film because they took your book, they turned it into a documentary. I got a chance to watch it the other day.
Oh, you did? Okay.
And I'm riveted because I'm living every shot just as I did 10 years ago, and I'm still stuck to the couch. I can't take my eyes off it. First of all, I want to ask you, what did you think about how they turned your book into this documentary? How do you feel about the job they did overall?
I mean, you tell me. I'm probably too close to have any perspective, but no, I thought it came out great. And this was a lot of hard work and a lot of cooperation. Yeah. And, you write a book. It's very much sort of a solo existence. You go in the cave, you've got your notes, you come out, you hope you've got a manuscript. This was very collaborative at every level. There's a score of music, and there are graphics. And the fact that Federer and Nadal both were willing to sit down and talk about this, even while they're 1 and 2 in the world, I thought really said a lot about them. No, I was thrilled. You always hear these horror stories about authors who sort of, they took my book and I pulled up to the Nevada state line. I went to the California state line, I took my money and bolted. And there are authors I know who literally have not seen the film adaptation. Yeah. Different when it's a documentary and it's nonfiction. But no, I thought I was thrilled.
I have to say, the only disappointment, and literally, folks, the only disappointment I had, Rafa didn't speak English. And we know his English is very good, but he was strictly Spanish throughout.
Yeah, I think that was tactical. I think that was on purpose. And I think he would have done it in English. And I think the filmmaker's decision was, maybe if we go in his native tongue, there'll be a level of confidence and a level of depth. And honestly, he and I think people who have followed his career, his fans, I think they might pick up on this. I think there was a level of sort of introspection that he achieved in Spanish that you don't always necessarily get in English. But no, it's interesting you say that because that was the filmmakers. That wasn't Rafa's great. He
because that was the only note I had about. I had pluses, I have minuses, and the only negative was Rafa.
That's really
in
interesting. That was intentional. And also, just Rafa's great. He would have done it in Mandarin if we'd asked.
But I like. The interviews were fantastic with all the people that got involved, the footage from their childhoods, respectively. I especially was taken because I had kind of forgotten about it, the 0-1 fourth-round match at Wimbledon between Federer and Sampras, which was basically the passing of the torch.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, right. And no, that match was exactly. That was, we've got our new king here, and it took Federer. I mean, I think people forget this. He's almost 37. He's this great decorated champion, this diplomat. He had a couple of rocky years there. I mean, this is not a guy who at age 18, 19 was a champion. It took him 3-4 years to kind of find his range and temperamentally and figure things out. Nadal was, 18 years old and he was off and running.
Right. Well, I remember, I don't think it was the last year of the old Armstrong at the National Tennis Center. It might have been the year before. But I remember watching Roger and thinking to myself as he was crashing out of the tournament that this might be the last we see of Roger Federer.
Oh,
now here
right.
he is
Yeah,
back
right.
on top.
No, exactly.
And it's amazing that here he is 4 or 5 years later. He's back at #1 in the world. And we'll talk about Wimbledon coming up in just a sec because we mentioned 10 years ago the final, the epic final. And now here we are, seeds 1 and 2 going in as the tournament starts on Monday. Federer #1, Nadal #2, Rafa coming off his 11th French Open. So let me put you on the spot. Who's going to win Wimbledon this year?
It sounds crazy. I think there's a man who's almost 37 years old who has 4 kids I think Federer's going to defend. And some of that is, I'm not sure I have a better alternative.
Right.
Nadal's won Wimbledon multiple times, but it's been 6-7 years since he's had a really good run there. Then again, if he can play as well as he did, half as well as he did at the French Open, I think it's Federer's looking pretty good once again.
We're on the mark with Jon Wertheim from Sports Illustrated and Tennis Channel, getting ready to watch Strokes of Genius. It premieres on Tennis Channel on Sunday night. So Andy Murray's back. He's not seeded. He's got Benoit Paire in the first round. I don't know if you saw the draw came out this morning, and I know you're going to be immersed. He's only played 3 matches all year. This goes back to last year in the quarterfinals when he lost. That was his last match. He had to skip the Open because of his hip injury, and he hadn't played any competitive match until about 2 weeks ago.
Right.
He's not seeded. Serena Williams, who has her baby last September, might have been late August, early September, but it was right around the Open. Okay. She's seeded 25th, and now we hear the U.S. Open and the other majors are making a rules change so that if you're away for maternity leave, your ranking, your placement in the draw won't be so adversely affected. I wanted to get first your feel for Andy and what he might be able to do in this tournament. Obviously, it's his home tournament. And then we'll talk about Serena and her chances of breaking the record.
Yeah, I mean, Andy Murray at Wimbledon is always a special event. He's won the event twice, gold medal winner at Wimbledon.
Yeah.
But this is a serious injury, and he just hasn't looked like the same player. I think it's going to be a while before he eases back into contending for majors again. The other thing, too, remember, is best of 5 sets.
Right.
So if you're coming back from injury, you need a certain level of durability. Exactly. God bless Andy Murray, and it's great that he's giving us a shot, but I would not look for him the second week of the tournament.
All right, let's talk about Serena, who's seeded 25th. May not have the most difficult path to get through. I was looking at the draw again this morning. There's some tough Madison Keys is in there, potentially, and some other top name. I think she starts with Arantxa Rus, who's a name that we don't hear very much of anymore. She's had some injury issues herself. But Serena back, trying to break the record for the most Grand Slam championships. What kind of chance do you give her?
It's a great. I think that's what everybody wants to know. And the 25 next to her name, it could be 1, it could be 100. I mean, this is Serena Williams we're talking about, so I'm not sure the seeding is so relevant. I would say, I mean, a lot of it is just physically, where is she? But she looked, as the French Open, she plays her first round match and looked a little rusty. And second match, looked better and had to fight. And by the third match she played, it looked a lot like Serena Williams.
Yeah.
And she had an injury, a pectoral muscle injury, but we're told it's not quite so serious. If she's not the favorite, I think she's certainly a favorite. And she's Serena Williams. She still is. She's playing, as you mentioned, to try and eclipse the all-time record for majors won, Margaret Court with 24. But realistically, I think Serena's the greatest ever. Right. And if this record, which is a little bit silly, I mean, Margaret Court won a lot of those playing Australian Opens and small tournaments against, borderline pro. I mean, it's not quite apples to apples, but I think if this is what's motivating Serena Williams to stay around, age like Federer, almost 37 years old, if this is what's motivating Serena Williams, great. I think she's got a real shot. With women, not only is it not best of 5, best of 3, but also remember there's an a day off in between rounds. And so I think that extra day of rest could really help her. I do not bet against Serena Williams.
Simona Halep coming off the French Open Championship, the #1 seed. What kind of chance do you give her?
I'd say good chance. And she's a mature player, so it's not as though she's wins the French Open. It's not like she's been at the bar stool for the last 3 weeks. I think she needed to show herself she could win 7 matches, that she could win one of these. And now that she has, I mean, some players win a major and great, career's over, top of the mountain, it's all gravy. I get the feeling Simona Halep is now that I can do this, I want to go back on the diving board. I want to try that one again. I like her chances.
I know it's a difficult question for sports people to answer, but I have to ask it because we've got an audience of some non-hardcore sports fans. What will they take away from Strokes of Genius if they sit down to watch on Sunday?
That's a great question. I hope there is a bit of appreciation of tennis that the casual fan or even the non-tennis fan would take away. But really, this is about a rivalry. And these are two guys, and they've been pitted against each other for more than a decade now. They're now in their 30s. And yet, we talk about rivalry in New York. Nobody says, I like the Red Sox and the Yankees. I can't decide which. No one says, I like Hillary and I like Trump. They're both kind of good. Yeah. You pick your side, you pick your tribe. This is a weird rivalry in the sense that it has all the elements and back and forth and momentum and contrast, but it also, it seems totally logical, totally normal to like both of them. Yeah. So in some ways, this is a very traditional sports rivalry, and in other ways, this is wearing a Duke hat and a Carolina hat. And these two guys, I think, genuinely like each other. I think they genuinely realize that they're better off that the other one exists. Yeah. And it's just astonishing. I mean, again, in tennis, this is like baseball players playing into their 60s. I mean, just given what we're used to in terms of career longevity, the fact that at 37 and 32, these guys are still the top 2 seeds at Wimbledon. It's amazing.
Well, it's Strokes of Genius. It premieres on Tennis Channel Sunday night, 10 o'clock Eastern Time. There's an entire marathon of Federer, Nadal, Wimbledon-related material that airs on Tennis Channel leading up to the documentary. Of course, the tournament for this year starts on Monday, 6:30 our time. Of course, we'll have updates every morning on 1010 Wins in the sports reports at 15 and 45. I'm Marc Ernay. He's Jon Wertheim from Sports Illustrated and the Tennis Channel, and you're on the mark.